So in this video, I'm going to go over sound design and how you can learn more sound design. And really, it can be difficult to learn sound design because it's such an open-ended process, and there's so many different ways that you can branch out, and there's no set guide to mastering it. And really, it comes down to having practiced a lot of different sounds and knowing how to create that sound in a lot of different situations. So the technique that I read about just a few days ago, and I thought it was really clever, was to reverse engineer sounds. So take a preset that you like in a synth that you want to learn, and you want to start with that preset, and you want to go back to the to its simplest form, which is just the wave, or the waveform, I should say. And it can work for things like FM synthesis as well. And as you do this, you start to learn what combinations of effects or what combinations of waveforms and oscillators create a certain sound or a certain texture or whatever, a certain feeling, ambience or whatever. And you can only get a definition for a sound. You can only say like its qualities. You don't have a word for every sound, so there's no like formula to make every sound. You kind of have to have experimented a little bit to know how to make a sound, and it's a lot of stuff by ear. So hopefully that made sense, but I'm gonna demonstrate it with one sound, and I'm gonna reverse engineer it and then recreate it from its simplest form. And what you'll realize is that a lot of sounds don't have to be super complicated to sound good, but a certain combination of techniques or simple kind of waves can create something that sounds super good. So hopefully this helped you, or you can learn a little bit by watching, and you can apply it to yourself and practice. And as you do this with more sounds, you just expand your palette of sound. Kind of like a painter has a palette of paint. You kind of expand your sound palette, and you have more go-to techniques to create a certain style of sound. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Really, you could do this with any kind of sound or sound plugin or synth. I could do it with the Ableton synths and deconstruct some of the built-in sounds, but for this I'm just gonna just use Serum because that's what I'm comfortable with. So step one, get comfortable with whatever program you're using and watch a tutorial on it if you don't know what to do, and or if you don't know where things are, and if you don't know how envelopes work and stuff. But let's go ahead and listen to this sound. It's kind of loud, so I'm gonna turn it down. So right off the bat, this sound is it kind of has a aggressive tone to it, and obviously it has the filter kind of wobble. And the first step is to go into the effects. So you want to go with the most superficial layer, and you want to go down back to the waves, which are right here. And right off the bat, we have a compressor. The compressor kind of adds volume to it and makes the peaks of the sound a little bit more intense. So if you don't know what each of the effects do, you also need to learn what their purpose is before you can really understand what you're deconstructing. Similar to just learning the synth, you need to like learn the effects, but the compressor gives it perceived loudness. And so when we take that off, it gets a lot more quiet and less aggressive, I would say. But then the chorus gives it a sense of stereo width a little bit more, and a little bit of a detuned sound. And chorus by definition is it detunes and kind of, I think it pans a little bit to the left and right. So I know by removing chorus it's gonna sound a lot more centered and less detuned. Now the filter that we're using creates most of the wobble effect that we hear. So So we're just gonna leave it because it's kind of the next part to what we're doing. Now we see this LFO right here, and it's controlling the volumes of each of the waves, and it's also controlling the cutoff. So if we turn this down, we slowly lose that filter effect. So now we know the LFO to a filter creates the wobble in this sound. So we can turn off the filter now and bypass the modulator, which is the LFO. So now we know the wobble comes from a filter. It comes from an LFO that's shaped like a sidechain. So when I play this, you can see as it goes through, the envelope is affecting the volumes as well. Kind of feeling. So as I turn down this pulse, we slowly get less of that. And now we're basically down to the original waves. And then there's the noise oscillator, or sorry, the noise, which is a sampler, and it's playing. Okay, let's disable everything else, and also the sub, and it's playing a little white noise kind of sound. So that's adding high end to the sound. We can disable that and disable the filter now because it's only going to the noise. And now let's go back to the waves. So now we're left with a square and another square and a saw wave. So those are the basic waves. But again, we can go even further and take this down, the unison. And the unison gave it the kind of detuned effect. And now we're down to our basic sounds. And I feel like there's another effect that we're not looking at. Oh, there we go. It was still detuned a little bit with the unison. Unison just adds more voices. But you need to know these things before, you need to know what each of these effects does before you can deconstruct it. So now if I wanted to recreate this, I could turn up the unison, turn on some white noise, turn that down so it's a little bit more subtle, add a filter, a high cut filter, so there's not that low end to the noise, and only apply it to the noise, not to the other sounds, just to the noise. And then I would add I will go ahead and add a filter now. Turn on the filter. I would route the LFO. I would take this, I would route it to the filter cutoff right here. So if I remove this, drag this to the filter cutoff, and then apply it to the full thing, and make an envelope that kind of is shaped like a side chain envelope, and then we get that wobble. And to even further that effect, I would add more. I would add the wobble to the levels right here, to the volumes, so we can get a beating effect and make it even sharper sounding. And then go back to the effects. We want to add some compression to emphasize the peaks a little bit, and then some chorus to give it even more detunedness and fullness, and then you have the sound. So if you don't understand the program, then maybe that was a little bit fast or whatever, but the point is you can really do this with any sound. And it can get more complicated. There could be more, there could be wavetable kind of modulation and stuff. But as you do that more and more, you learn how to create similar things. And you can even be more experimental and do it with a different sounding sound. And also, what I forgot to mention is that you need to consider what each effect is doing, or what each kind of step that you're taking is doing. So as you deconstruct it, you need to kind of hear the difference and kind of establish that kind of connection in your brain, that the LFO to the filter creates that wobble effect. So when you want a sound that's wobbly or has that wobble or that beating kind of side chain effect, you know to go to the LFO. Or let's say with the compression, you want more aggressiveness. You want to make that connection that the compressor is being more aggressive. If you start to deconstruct stuff and you don't know what it's doing, then you need to pause there and really consider what it's doing and find out what you're deconstructing. And this will not, it might be challenging and it gets you out of your comfort zone, but you can't grow unless you're going through some sort of discomfort. And as you deconstruct and learn everything and force yourself to learn every little step, you start to expand your knowledge of synthesis, and that's how you get better at programming sounds and designing. So hopefully that helps, and definitely put this into practice, and I'll see you guys next time.
Shake just a little bit.